New recommendations were released earlier this year by the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, DGAC, DGAC, an independent group of doctors and nutritionists who say we should cut down on meat for the sake of our health and the environment. In response to this, apparently Republicans in Congress are throwing a temper tantrum, as Lindsey Abrams points out over at Salon. Apparently, they're pretending their objections are all about science. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans are updated every 5 years, Lindsey Abrams writes, and they found that quote, a diet higher in plant-based foods such as vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and lower in calories in animal-based foods is more health-promoting and is associated with less environmental impact than the current U.S. diet. Now, this is the first time sustainability, you know, the opposite of Koch Industries and ExxonMobil, unsustainable burning fossil fuels. This is the first time sustainability has come into this issue. And, you know, it has a lot of people on the right quite upset. I'm guessing Jeff Steyer is one of them. He's the Director of Risk Analysis with the National Center for Public Policy Research. Nationalcenter.org is the website for that conservative think tank. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Tom. It's good to be back with you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. So I don't see anything wrong. I don't see anything wrong with this. They're saying, hey, you know, this is going to make people healthier, and by the way, it'll be good for the climate. What's wrong with that?
Well, you were right when you said it's about science, and that's what this is supposed to be about. But it's about science and it's about law. I follow this issue very closely. In fact, I'm the right winger who blew the I'm the right wing think tank who blew the whistle on USDA's Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee for going beyond the law, and now Congress has listened and is about to change.
By going beyond the law, you mean talking about climate change, for God's sake.
Exactly. So let me explain. You were right to say that every 5 years, the USDA and FDA get together and put together the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee to update, to issue, what that committee does is issue the recommendation to the agencies on how we should change our diets. That law, which has been in effect for many years, and we've had many changes to the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. Yeah, those are the ones that say eat more saturated fat, eat less saturated fat, fewer eggs, more eggs, the whole thing.
Right.
They are supposed to guide us on how to eat to affect our health, to prevent disease. And as you pointed out, for the first time, there's something else going into the equation, and that is the environment. Now, we could argue about whether or not meat, animal protein, affects the environment in a negative way more so than, I don't know, soybeans.
It's not an argument.
That argument. But that's not what this is about. This is about Congress telling the agencies, advise Americans on how to eat for their health. It never said advise Americans how to eat to have a more sustainable diet. That's not what the law said, and I called them out on it. And Congress is reining them in.
But all they're saying is, I mean, they're not saying you should eat this way for the climate. They're saying that you eat.
No, they are.
No, they're not. I just read the quote.
So let me tell you.
I'll read it again.
Tom, you can read a quote from a left-wing outlet like Alternate.
No, this is a quote from the Dietary Guidelines for Americans from the FDA or the USDA.
Tom, I was watching the meetings. I was monitoring the meetings. I've written about this for over a year. So you can point out one quote from a defensive member of that committee. I actually monitored the panel.
This is the actual conclusion that you're objecting to. They said, quote, a diet higher in plant-based foods such as fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds, and lower in calorie and animal-based foods is more health-promoting, which was their mandate, and is associated with less environmental impact than is the current U.S. diet. So basically, they're doing their job, and they're saying, oh, by the way, there's a bonus effect. What's wrong with the bonus effect, other than that you don't believe in climate change or something?
Well, I didn't say that. You could believe in climate change or not believe in climate change, or you could think that eating animal protein somehow contributes to climate change more so than getting your protein from other sources.
It does.
But we could have that discussion. But this is about what Congress is doing now is saying we told you to do it. This is part of this view that agencies can go on and do whatever they want, regardless of what Congress tells them. The administration is not reined in by the law, and the law is very clear here that the dietary guidelines ought to be based on nutrition advice to make you healthy. And in fact, the USDA, when it was originally defending these guidelines, advisory committee reports, and by the way, the Obama administration's Tom Vislak, the head of the USDA, actually backed away from them. But when they were defending these recommendations based on sustainability, it said that meat caused all these problems. But the science doesn't necessarily support that. But the argument here is simply don't go beyond what the agency was authorized by Congress to do. So what Congress is doing now is just reinforcing what the law already is. It's not even necessary except for the fact that activist groups...
Well, no, the Republicans are trying to basically kill this because, God forbid, these people mention climate change.
The law didn't authorize the nutritionists to get into climate change.
It didn't prevent them from either. And now Republicans want to prevent them from getting into that. Should that not be a consideration?
Tom, it should not be a consideration unless Congress authorizes the agency.
Right, and Republicans in Congress are not going to do that because they're in the pocket of ExxonMobil and the Koch brothers. I get that.
Tom, it's not Republicans in Congress. It's the way that the law was written and passed in a bipartisan way that it needs to be about nutrition. And now they're doing something.
And they said, here's the answer to the problem with nutrition. Oh, and by the way, it also is going to help climate change. They didn't say we should do this because it's going to help climate change.
Yes, they did. I will
read it to you again, Jeff, if you want.
Tom, you're reading one line. I read the entire Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee report. Not only did it talk about global warming, it talked about labor policy. All of the wish list of the left got thrown into here. Aquaculture, fish sustainability, all sorts of issues got thrown into these dietary...
I don't think that this is the wish list of the left, Jeff. I think this is the wish list of all Americans who want a decent environment and a reasonable food supply, with the exception of the billionaires who can make their money off fossil fuels.
Actually, it's the left-wing wish list. There was labor policy. There was aqua sustainability.
How is labor left-wing?
Look,
aren't American workers American workers? What's left-wing about being a worker?
Tom, if you think labor union policies are not dominated by left-wing politics, I'm going to...
No, I think they're right dead in the center of America, Jeff.
I'm going to concede that point to you and let your listeners decide who's more credible when it comes to that issue. All I'm saying is that the nutrition guidelines were dominated by things like not only nutrition, but labor policy and sustainability. It had very little to do with a decision based on the science in the law that was passed.
No, it had everything to do with the science. They concluded the science, and there's very little debate about this, Jeff, that if people move to a more plant-based and less meat-based diet, they're going to get healthier. And they're just saying this.
So then why did the committee poison the advice with the rest of the left-wing advice if they're right on that science?
There's nothing left-wing about this. This is middle America. I realize for the fossil fuel billionaires, they want to slap a label on it and say, oh, my God, you can't regulate us. But, there's nothing left-wing about this. People are concerned about their food. They're concerned about their environment. And they're concerned, frankly, about whether or not they're going to have a job tomorrow, about labor policies. What's wrong with that?
So, Tom, then we should pass a new law that says that the USDA and the FDA should get together and come up with what you view as mainstream American policies about labor law and acquisition.
No, I disagree.
All these issues.
Jeff, I think the law is just fine as it is. They found a strong basis for these recommendations in diet alone. And then they said, oh, by the way, here are some other good benefits for people.
Tom, I agree with you. The law is fine on its own. The problem is the administration, as is often the case, is going beyond the law. And if, in fact, you were right, and this was a mainstream American view, Congress could get together, rewrite the law, and tell them to...
Except that that ain't going to happen, Jeff, when you've got the Republicans controlling both houses of Congress, and they're completely controlled by the fossil fuel billionaires.
Both houses of Congress represent the people, unless you think that's not the case.
No, I think they represent the billionaires. I really do. It's a sad thing to say, but... Jeff Steyer, nationalcenter.org. Thank you, Jeff.